Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas using the source material itself. Okay, so today we're going to tackle a really interesting question, something we all deal with. Why is it so incredibly hard to change our minds or to get someone else to change theirs?
So let's kick things off with a classic piece of advice. Something we've all been told a million times about how to be persuasive.
Right? The idea is that it builds trust, it shows you're confident, and that makes your argument more convincing. But what if I told you the actual science says something completely different, like the exact opposite?
Yeah, no kidding. A study back in 2013 found that when someone is trying to win you over, making more eye contact can actually make you dig your heels in. It triggers resistance. We kind of shut down. So what in the world is going on here?
Well, it turns out our minds have this built-in defense system. You can almost think of it like a psychological immune system. And it kicks into high gear the second our core beliefs get challenged.
And you got to understand, this isn't really about logic or facts. It's about our identity. When some new piece of information feels less like a debate and more like a personal attack on who we are, all the internal alarm bells start ringing and the walls go straight up.
It's kind of like this. Our brains just roll out the welcome mat for any information that confirms what we already believe. It's like, yep, come on in. But the moment something comes along that threatens our worldview, whoop, 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 the threat alarm goes off. So the real question is, how on earth do you get a message past those defenses?
All right, so one of the most powerful ways to do this is a technique called self-affirmation. And what it does is pretty brilliant. It basically builds a buffer that helps lower those defenses we just talked about.
The whole theory is actually pretty straightforward. The idea is, look, if we feel secure and good about ourselves overall, as a whole person, then one little piece of information that challenges us doesn't feel like an attack on our entire identity. It's not as threatening.
And you know what's wild? The way they do this in studies is incredibly simple. A lot of the time, it's just a quick writing exercise. People are asked to pick a value that's really important to them, like creativity or their family, and just write a little bit about why it matters. That's it. Now, let's check out the massive impact this tiny exercise can have.
Okay, so first up, let's look at education. For a lot of minority students, there's this constant psychological threat from negative stereotypes, and that can be a huge hurdle when it comes to doing well in school.
So, a major study found that doing this simple writing task just a few times a year had this incredible effect. For low-performing African-American students, it cut the rate of having to repeat a grade by more than 2/3. I mean, that's huge. It worked by creating a buffer against something called stereotype threat.
And it's not just in school. This same idea works with our health. You know how when you see a health warning about something you do, it can feel like a personal criticism, right? And what's our first reaction? We get defensive and just want to ignore it. Okay, so check this out. In one study, they gave higher-risk drinkers some pretty scary information linking alcohol to breast cancer. But the group that did that little self-affirmation writing exercise first, they were way more likely to actually accept the risk and take the information seriously. Compared to the group that didn't, they were just more open to hearing it, even though it was threatening.
So, here's the key takeaway so far. We don't have to use a brute force approach to try and change someone's mind. It turns out that sometimes the absolute smallest, gentlest nudge is all it takes to sneak past those defenses and get people to open up.
And researchers have found a bunch of these little nudges that work. For example, just putting someone in a good mood can give them the mental energy to deal with tough information. Or simply reminding people, hey, it's your choice, can make them less resistant. Even just framing a warning in a careful, non-threatening way can guide people without making them feel defiant.
Let me give you a really striking example. A study looked at pro-anorexia websites. All the researchers did was put a simple, informative warning page up before you could get to the site. It wasn't judgmental, just factual. And that one little page, it made more than a third of the visitors just turn away. That's it. No force, no shame, just a tiny, gentle nudge.
Okay, so what does this all add up to? What does it mean for how we talk to each other, and maybe even more importantly, how we listen when we hear something that challenges us? It's really a total shift in how we think about persuasion. So instead of the brute force way, direct challenges, intense eye contact, all the stuff we now know can just make things worse, it's about something totally different. It's about creating an environment for change. It's about buffering the other person's sense of self, making them feel psychologically safe, so they can actually consider a new idea without feeling like they're under attack.
So the really big idea here is this. Our brains are literally wired to protect our worldview.
That resistance we feel to new ideas, it's a natural, self-protective instinct. It's not a flaw. But if we can understand why it happens, we can learn to communicate a whole lot smarter and maybe, just maybe, become better listeners ourselves.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to chew on, right? If our first instinct, our default setting, is always to defend what we believe, what does it actually take to consciously lower our own shields and just truly listen? Something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.